As you know, if you've watched any of my other videos, I'm pretty hard on our politicians and governments for what their motives are for inflicting the current problems that they are inflicting on us, particularly, outstandingly, the problems of mass immigration and multiculturalism. What I say is they're not doing it by accident. It's not because they're lovably incompetent. They just can't seem to get it together. Oh dear, it's so difficult being a politician. You wouldn't like it. It's really hard. And then they're not just fouling it up because they can't quite manage it. It's being done with great skill and surprising aggression and almost admirable ruthlessness, speed and aggression. And it is, for now, it is working. It is deliberate. Now, I don't say that this is a coldly calculated conspiracy where people get together in bunkers and talk about it. I'm saying it's a felt conspiracy of class interests. It's almost, I would say it's a kind of reflex sense. This serves us as a class. It serves our interests. Of course it must be right. We don't need to talk about it because we're all in agreement. Let's just, and it's cross-party, it's above politics, it's something they're going to push through, and they will not tolerate any alternative to it. And I'm saying that the real reason is that it grinds you down, grinds the rest of us down, makes us dependent, makes us and denies us a sense of home, a sense of commonality, makes us more sort of pathetic and passive and turning to government for help so that we won't turn on government. I think that will continue until the state itself breaks down. We're not going to vote our way out of this. We will collapse our way out of this. Now, this is quite a hard point of view to take. And what I want to do, and I think people might say, well, that seems a bit psychopathic. Surely power addicts couldn't be that ruthless. So they can be as ruthless as any other addict. And I would say power is a more dangerous addiction. And so what I wanted to do is to go through some of the explanations that they give, some of the motives that they talk about, to say, this is what I think, well, this is what they say they're doing. How does this stack up? So if I go first, I'll look at a few recent news stories. Then I want to look at some history since '97, a little bit of Tony Blair, if you can stomach it, and then some possibly semi or 1/4 innocent solution. If it does amount to that, I don't think it is, but one that I came up with, that it might be the case. It might be a more general underlying incompetence. I don't think it's even that. But what I want to do is to start with news stories. So if I look at this one, this is that's from the Observer. That was about a month ago. Now this is, there are a few news stories over the last month with politicians saying, got to have more immigration. It's great stuff. We need it. And they never say why we need it. So we need more EU workers, admits leading Tory Brexiteer. Really means more immigration. A leading Tory Brexiteer on Sunday calls on ministers to reopen the UK's borders to tens of thousands of young workers from EU nations. That would include places like Romania, in order to tackle acute post-Brexit labour shortages that he says are driving up inflation. Now he keeps going on throughout this article about inflation, which is, I find that interesting because for decades, successive governments have been saying immigration is great stuff, makes everyone richer. If you make the pie bigger, you make the pie sweeter. As any child knows, that doesn't happen. It doesn't make you richer. It doesn't make you more productive simply because somebody from a country where he struggles to write in his own language comes over here. That does not make you more productive. Now, but that's what governments have been saying for decades. What this fella is now saying is that we need more migration in order to reduce inflation, because labour shortages are driving up inflation. What he means is he wants more migration in order to reduce wages, to increase the pool of labour, increase competition for jobs, and that means that employers have to pay less for people. So he wants to drive down your wages. He's not going to put it like that. He's going to say it'll reduce inflation. It'll reduce inflation by making you poorer. So that's what he's saying. So I think I would put that squarely, however innocent an explanation you think that is. I think that's about using immigration to grind you down, make you poorer, make you more manageable, make you more welfare dependent, get that welfare drip feed in your arm to sedate you. I think that's what he wants. So I think that's an example for me. Okay, the next one here is senior Tory. It says, right-thinking MPs, no more overseas workers are needed in the UK. And that one is from the 20th of June, so a bit more than a month ago. Politicians need to speak with more honesty and openness about the importance of foreign workers to the economy, according to former Cabinet Minister Stephen Crabb, who said that Britain needs more workers from overseas and will carry on doing that. Blah-de-blah. Now this is, he doesn't say why. This is the closest he gets in the article to saying why. All of these people, they say, we need more immigration, we need it. They never explain why, they never give a reason. And my point is, if someone, let me just do this. If someone is doing something bad to you, and they've done it for years and decades, and they will not tell you why they are doing it, you know there's some nasty, probably criminal reason behind it. And that's what I think is going on here. So, but according to Crabb, the Tory MP for Pembrokeshire, most right-thinking, smart politicians know that Britain needs more workers from overseas and will carry on doing that. At the same time, we need to do a better job at tackling economic inactivity and helping people live fulfilled lives. Yeah, by working longer is what he means. He just wants more people in the workforce to drive down wages. These things are not a binary choice. Blah-de-blah-de-blah-de. Okay, so no explanation there. I think he means driving down wages, but he doesn't say that. All right, so the next one there is this old familiar face, William Hague. Now, I'll be a bit softer on him. I think that picture suggests he's losing his marbles slightly. The article certainly suggests it to me. Even right-wingers know we need migrants. And here's the phrase, this is only the start of the age of migration. Parties from all sides must strive for new ideas or risk French-style chaos. So he's doing a bit of Tosser's patriotism there, bashing the French. All right. And the start of the age of migration, most of us thought that immigration to this country is becoming a tidal wave is massively too high. I shudder to think what the new age of that suggests. The new age of migration suggests a step change, a quantum leap in the numbers coming here. I guess maybe by a factor of 10, so it'll go from 1.1, 1.2 million, maybe to 11 or 12 million. That's the new age of migration that he's talking about there. We are entering this is written by him, we are entering the age of migration. Measured in numbers of people, this is likely to be on a scale never before known in human history, etc., etc. He goes on about there's a lot of people getting born in Africa, and a lot of them will want to come here. Well, yeah, don't let them. Okay, and this again, he doesn't say why. The closest he gets to saying why is here. As their people, meaning people in Europe, become older and sicker, they need migrants. There can be no starker illustration of this than last Friday's announcements by the Italian government, led by hard-right Premier Giorgia Meloni, etc., to control illegal entry into Italy across the Mediterranean. Her administration said it would nevertheless give 425,000 work permits to non-EU nationals. So his evidence that we need immigration is that an Italian politician is allowing mass immigration. Okay, that's like the people who said President Obama is brilliant because he's president. He's a brilliant president because he's president. All right, and the ideas of the New Conservatives, a group of Tory MPs calling for tougher immigration controls, come up against the same reality. What reality? You haven't given us any reality. You've just given us some hand-waving. The only way they could arrive at a plan to reduce numbers to about a quarter of a million. It wasn't long ago, it was tens of thousands is what they said. A quarter of a million a year was to stop visas being granted for care workers. But this would immediately produce an intensified crisis in social care. They also wanted a drastic reduction in student visas that would devastate the income of our universities. Now, those two things tend to be, from what I can tell, the only justifications they come up with, that older people need care and people in Britain won't do it. The people in Britain will do it if they're paid enough, or they will do a job that frees up someone else to take on a care job. And many older people do fear that being at the hands of somebody from a completely different country that has completely different values. And I don't think, it would seem to me to be a back to front reason to justify mass immigration, so that you can be subjected to that when you are helpless and dying. And the other one is universities. If we don't have enough foreign students coming in, there won't be enough students to justify the universities. Well, okay, then we don't need so many universities. Stop spending so much money on universities. That will free up academics to do something else. Maybe they could become care workers, or learn to code, which will free up someone else to free up someone else, who then in turn becomes a care worker. This is nonsense. This is it's not even circular logic. It's just drivel, piffle, really. And then he goes on about a bit more about the new age of migration. So he's really up with the times. He's down with the kids, isn't he? He knows what's happening out there. He's a happening guy. All right. So the next one is none other than Keir Starmer, and this is his reason. So you've had inflation, you've had care workers, and you've had just we need them. For no specified reason. Now with Rishi Sunak, he's saying that it's going to pay for public health workers. Excuse me. What he's saying here, foreigners will pay more for NHS to help fund wage rise, and surcharge to increase by £400, that's per year, to meet the cost of salary increases, but extra savings still needed from government budgets. Foreigners who temporarily move to the UK will have to pay an extra £400 per year towards health services. So like if they come here to study, they have to pay a bit of money towards their healthcare to help fund the big rise in public sector wage rises announced by Rishi Sunak. And what he's saying is, and this is the key paragraph there, and he declined to specify where the savings will come from. But what he's talking about is the amount that 400, the amount of money that is going to be provided by that extra 400 quid per migrant coming here, 400 quid per year, is around 1 billion of the 2 billion extra funding needed to cover the pay rises this year will come from increasing 2 fees paid by foreigners when they move to the UK. So basically, he's saying we'll find 1 billion through savings, we'll find the other billion by migrants paying 400 quid. Well, a billion divided by 400, that's 2.5 million. So that means you'll get 2.5 more migrants, or people paying that 400 quid per year. I don't think he's joking. All right, so that's another reason. So on top of driving down your wages to reduce inflation, just because we need them, and because there's a new age of migration to universities, and the idea of having someone from outside Europe care for you when you're older. Now it's going to pay for. We're going to have 2.5 million to pay for the public sector pay rise. Okay, so bear with me. Okay, now the next one is this one. Now this is a BBC article, quite recent, again, a couple of months old, and that's that Laura Kunzberg. Don't know, I've read her occasionally, don't know much about her. What she did was to interview 5 previous Home Secretaries and to ask them about this issue, which is why it's so hard to cut migration. And there's Rishi Sunak. Rishi Sunak has made cutting illegal migration a key priority. So the country needs immigrants. Now, and this is, those 5 ex-Home Secretaries are all saying the country needs immigrants. But from this article, they are not saying why. No one's saying why more immigrants are needed. So this is, but one of them said, we have put in place the most liberal regime ever to enable workers the economy needs and students to come to the country legally. Again, students. Why do we need people studying it? A student doesn't, being a student is about consumption. It's not about production. Home Secretary Suella Braverman might want to put her foot on the brake, but half a mile further up Whitehall, the Treasury tends to put its foot on the accelerator if there simply are not enough Brits either willing or able to do jobs that business and public services need to fill. So, no, Brits will do it, but if you pay them enough, just pay more. That is the thing that they don't want to do. They don't want to increase wages. They want to drive down your wages. And that, again, that fits with what I'm saying, that the purpose is to make you more dependent, make you more manageable, make you easier to rule. And one way to do it is to by increasing the pool of labour. That dilutes everyone's wages, especially because all of those new people come in, they compete not with the whole workforce, but just with a few people who are negotiating new work contracts, who are looking for work and saying, well, what are you going to pay me? And that's one, usually I think it's about 2% of the workforce at any time doing that. So it can have a really big effect driving down wages, and that's why they like it. And that's, she's quoting that. I'm guessing that she thinks that this journalist thinks that's what all 5 ex-Home Secretaries thought. So again, that's the reason. Students and jobs that can't be filled because British people won't do them. Incidentally, that was not a reason for, you would think, okay, if there's, if unemployment is too low, then that would mean during previous recessions, when unemployment has been running high, there would have been calls for repatriation. We've got too many, we need to reverse the flow, but that is not the case. So I want to show you, and this leads me smoothly into a little bit of history. So now that comes from a website called Statista. I find their graphs annoying, but it's quite useful, some of the data. That goes from 64 through to 97. So 97 is just there, and then right up pretty much up to the present day. And now what I want to point out there is that around 2008, that was still mass immigration coming in. So about 574,000 came in. That it didn't go right back down to 574,000 being pushed out. So we had we were having repatriation, which according to their logic, that would be the case. If the need is to fill positions that employers can't fill, well, if there's a steep rise in unemployment, as there was in 2008, the logic would seem to suggest we start pushing people out, kicking people out. That didn't happen at all. The curve kept rising. Okay, that's now. I just want to show you. What I want to show you is a couple of things. Firstly, how this began in 97. What you can see is that up to 1997, so there's 96 there, 97, it was pretty flat. Net migration was round about zero. In 97, it was about 48,000 net migration, but even total migration, which is that blue line, that's all people coming in. The black line is people going out, emigration. Yeah, it was people coming in was about stable, around about the 250,000 mark. And then in 1997, it suddenly, there's 96, 97, that's when it goes up, as soon as Blair gets elected. And it has just kept going up, and it's going up on an exponential curve until you hit 2022, and the numbers that came in is 1.163. That's nearer 1.2 million than 1.1 million. I'm just rounding that up to 1.2 million. Now I'll show you a less irritating graph. The same graph in the BBC, which I find this, again, unusually honest for the BBC. This is an article called from November, UK net migration hits all-time record at 504,000. That's a lie, by the way. It's I would say it's about a bit over 200,000 more than that. What that graph you see again going from 1996, suddenly 97, it goes up and up and up, and then 1.1 million. Actually, that's 1.163 million. A huge increase. That graph is going vertical. That's what you call an exponential curve, going vertical. So even if there wasn't the downturn because of the pandemic, people weren't traveling, that's still a curve going vertical. And what you'll see here, something that the BBC have included, which astonishes me. Who wrote this article? I don't know. Does it say who wrote it? Dominic Casciani. Well done, Dominic. Congratulations. You did something useful. And What he included there is change in methodology. So one of the I really dislike this idea of net migration for a whole load of reasons. Partly it's used to disguise what's happening. You get a lot of foreigners, non-EU foreigners coming in, and quite a lot of British people leave. So so if 1 million foreigners come in and 1 million British people leave, they'll say net migration was zero. There is no migration, so the country isn't changing. Whereas in fact it changes all the more if more people are leaving. And the other thing is looking at net migration, it treats us all as cheap sausage meat, interchangeable. We can all be fed into the sausage machine, which again fits in with my theme that it is about making us more manageable, just easier to process, easier to rule, to deal with. And another reason is it gives governments the opportunity to change the methodology, which they did. It looks like it in 2020. If you see that change in methodology, the numbers leaving, suddenly it goes from about 400 to about, I'd say, 620. I would say that's probably about a 210, 220 change in numbers. They've reduced the amount of net migration by dumping the level of by increasing the numbers of people leaving. So if you see that our net migration overnight went from about, I'd say, a bit over 300,000 to about 75,000, something like that. So I would say that figure there, net migration, is not 504,000. It's about 700, 720,000. That's what they've done. They've cooked the books. They've filled the figures. Okay. What you get here, or what I get from this graph and from that previous one there, is the aggression and speed with which the Blair government pursued its open door mass immigration policy. As soon as it got into office, that's it. We're going to have a multicultural society. We're going to have mass immigration. We're going to stab you in the eye with it, and you get no say. We're not even going to tell you about it. It's just going to happen. No discussion. And the kind of ruthlessness and determination, the eye-gouging determination with which they did it, is something you sort of almost admire. That they're so completely unscrupulous and energetic about it. It's just the speed with which they did it. And if I give you, well, I'll start with this article. This is one that you might already have read. It's by a fellow called Andrew Nether, writing in the Evening Standard in 2009. The date is there somewhere, 2009. And what he's talking about is around 2000, 2001. So the government's been in office for about 3 or 4 years, and that they are really. That mass immigration curve is going, and they're deciding should they talk about it. And so what they've got is the Performance Innovation Unit, which was Tony Blair's Cabinet Office think tank. They wrote a report saying mass immigration is good for us. We want it more, please. Okay, that's basically it. So the PIU's reports were legendarily tedious within Whitehall, but their big immigration report was surrounded by an unusual air of both anticipation and secrecy. Drafts were handed out in summer 2000 only with extreme reluctance. There was a paranoia about it reaching the media. Eventually published in January 2001, so 6 months later, the innocuously labelled RDS Occasional Paper number 67, Migration and Economic and Social Analysis, focused heavily on the labour market case. But the earlier drafts I saw also included a driving political purpose, that mass immigration was the way the government was going to make the UK truly multicultural. Yeah, it's mass immigration has never been about economics or about economic benefit. It has always been about the kind of country we want. That's all it is. You think about it, as long as you bear that in mind, you understand the key to mass immigration. I remember coming away from some discussions with the clear sense that the policy was intended, even if this wasn't its main purpose, to rub the right's nose in diversity and render their arguments out of date. You've probably heard that quote before. That seemed to me to be a manoeuvre too far. Ministers were very nervous about the whole thing, for despite Barbara Roche's keenness to make her big speech, she's often portrayed as the villain of the piece because she wanted to make a speech about it, whilst other people wanted to keep it secret. So to make her big speech and to be upfront, there was a reluctance elsewhere in government to discuss what increased immigration would mean, above all for Labour's core white working class vote. Yeah, their wages are going to go down. Of course they're concerned about it. This shone through even in the published report. The social outcomes it talks about are solely those for immigrants. And this first-term immigration policy got no mention among the platitudes on the subject in Labour's 1997 manifesto. Okay, so again, there's no claptrap, there's no blather, there's no talk. It's just, we're going to do this. We're not going to tell you. We're going to do it in secret, and you're going to live with it. And again, it's this determination and the focus that they had that's kind of it's really crooked and bent and needs to be held to account at some stage. These people need to be held to account. But you sort of kind of you sometimes you admire your enemy for the energy they display. Now I'll give you a little example of this, which seems to me to fit with it. Again, I can't mind read this fellow. I don't know his motives. I'm just looking at a Wikipedia page. He was the first immigration minister. He comes in 1997, and it seems to me he immediately goes about his work, trashing, being not very nice about the Immigration Control Office. So Mike O'Brien described the procedure of checking passports as routine and unproductive, and said that enhanced technologies such as closed-circuit television, etc., combined with close liaison between border agencies, will create a stronger deterrent than current immigration departure checks. So he basically got rid of embarkation controls, checking your passport when you leave. I don't know if you go to Europe, quite a lot of European countries, you show your passport when you enter, but you show it when you leave again, and they scan it as well. So the Immigration Service Union criticised the move, saying the changes made it harder to ensure that illegal immigrants ordered out of the country had actually left. So he got rid of that control. And about a bit under a decade later, when, no, it was almost exactly, I think, a decade later, when the Home Office, the government are asked, what is the level of illegal immigration in the UK? They said, we've no idea. How should we know? Who are we to keep tabs on that kind of thing? And then they said that the Home Office was not fit for service, not fit for purpose, rather. A phrase that's been repeated a number of times since then. That's an example of the speed at which this government moved in order to put us on that curve from 1997. Sorry, from there, 1997 onwards. Okay, so that's him, and that's Andrew Nether there. And now we come to this fella. Might as well get the plane out of the way first. Tell me you can look at that picture without feeling a sense of revulsion and retaliation. I'll get it out of the way. What I want to talk about here is this man has talked about, he's tried to justify mass immigration, and in contrast to what was going on here in these other tabs, so that fellow Mike O'Brien and Andrew Nether talking about their policy and keeping it secret, and how fast they moved to increase immigration in '97. Blair, when he realises there are concerns about immigration, yeah, he talks about it, but in a way that makes no sense at all. Just doesn't stack up. It's a lot of contradictory pabulum. It's just drivel, bilge, piffle, just wind in the ears, and that's what he's talking. Now, this is a speech that he made in 2006. You can see reports on it, but the speech itself appears to be in memory hold on government websites. I managed to find it on the Wayback Machine, and in this, what he's talking about, this is in 2006. Now, Tony Blair, he provided nothing. He did nothing but harm. He's an evil seed, and just the poisonous weeds and tendrils are we still see them coming out from his rule. He makes destruction the way a bee makes honey, and but his success was, what he would like to think, I think, is he was extremely good at manipulating appearances. I don't think it even goes that far. He and his advisors were simply, I think, were very good at imposing a few small PR maxims. And the main one, I think, was you get out ahead of a story early. And this is what he did here with this speech. 2006, people are expressing, that upward immigration curve has been going for a decade. People don't like it. People are starting to talk about it. So he's now going to get out ahead of it and just say something about it. Getting out ahead of it doesn't mean addressing it. It just means that when the papers come to report on it, they don't report on the issue, they report on your speech on the issue. And so what he's talking about is the duty to integrate shared British values. So I want to go down, you can read the thing yourself. None of it makes any sense. What he's trying to say is culture, different culture, good. Differences in culture, good. You can have any difference in culture you want. That's great, that's fine, that's diversity, it's multiculturalism, it's lovely, it's wonderful. Differences in values, bad. Okay, and the idea, this stupid idea that culture and values they don't overlap at all. I would say culture actually creates a lot of your values. A lot of your values come out of your culture. So religion feeds culture. Culture feeds your political values. So, but what he says here, when it comes to our essential values, belief in democracy, the rule of law, tolerance, equal treatment for all, respect for this country and its shared heritage. That, by the way, now he's saying that this is what makes us British. He goes on to say this. Any country, pretty much most countries in the world would say that. Belief in democracy. Okay, so who's going to say they don't believe in democracy? The rule of law. Again, all of these things are self-serving things. It's things that serve government. This is another way that multiculturalism empowers politicians, because it means that your identity, your nationality, your who you are as a people doesn't depend on your own characteristics. It depends on your ruler's characteristics, who they are. So an Afghan migrant who wants nothing in common with me, I have nothing in common with him. The only thing we do have in common is the overarching authority, the politician who rules over us, the system. So the belief in democracy and the rule of law, no politician is going to say, actually, I don't want you to obey the laws that I pass. Tolerance, again, he keeps putting forward tolerance as the British value. Tolerance isn't a value. It's not a virtue. It's not a virtue anymore. Not firing bullets is sometimes the right thing to do in a military situation. But you wouldn't say someone is a good soldier because he doesn't fire bullets. Okay, it's not that's not a, tolerance isn't a civic virtue, or isn't a virtue at all. It depends on what you're tolerating, any more than not firing bullets in a military situation. So that Afghan migrant would incidentally say he's much more tolerant than me, because in Afghanistan they tolerate very wide-scale abuse of little boys, particularly queuing up outside police stations, I think on a Thursday night. Don't know why on a Thursday night. Anyway, respect, tolerance, equal treatment for all, respect for this country and its shared heritage. It doesn't, what equal treatment for all means, well, he didn't achieve that. Then that is where we come together. It is, so it's not much, is it? It is what we hold in common. It is what gives us the right to call ourselves British, so anyone who believes in those things can call themselves British. So that would suggest to me that pretty much anyone anywhere in the world right now can call themselves British. So at that point, no distinctive culture or religion supersedes our duty to be part of an integrated United Kingdom. This is all wishful thinking. It's all wouldn't it be nice if everyone all felt the same and we had a nice integrated United Kingdom? He's not addressing reality. This, I bet he didn't negotiate this way when he negotiated with Slobodan Milosevic or Saddam Hussein. So we go down to the bottom of this. Oh God, imagine having to sit through him saying this. Okay. But he's talking about tolerance here. So this paragraph there. We protect this attitude by defending it. Our tolerance is part of what makes Britain. Britain. Well, again, a French, German, Italian, a Canadian, an American would say that no, this is nonsense. It's not a value anyway. And he knows this is just the confusion of language. So conform to it. Conform to the tolerance. Yeah. How do you conform to tolerance? This is just jabber, or don't come here. So I think what he's hoping is that a tribesman in northern Pakistan is listening in to this speech on his earphones and saying, "Oh, that nice Mr. Blair says that if I'm not tolerant, I shouldn't come to Britain. Well, no, I better not go to Britain then because I don't want to offend that nice Mr. Blair." This is the kind of the irrelevance and indifference to reality that he's displaying here. This is talk for its own sake. Okay, we don't want the hate mongers, whatever their race, religion, or creed. He has to say that. And then, if you come here lawfully, we welcome you. Well, I thought he didn't want hate mongers. What if a hate monger comes here lawfully? What if someone who's intolerant comes here lawfully? What if someone who doesn't believe in democracy, doesn't believe in fair and equal treatment for all, comes to Britain lawfully? Well, he's going to welcome him. If you are permitted to stay here permanently, you become an equal member of our community and become one of us. So he is negated in his conclusion. He has wiped away everything else he said before. Then you and all of us who want to can worship God in our own way, take pride in our own different cultures, after our own fashion, respect our own distinctive histories, etc., etc. Okay, and then something, neither the racists nor the extremists should be allowed to destroy it. Okay, so it's just, this is, well, my point is that he doesn't have any justification for multiculturalism that he's going to tell you about. He's just saying that people should integrate. He doesn't deal with any benefits to mass immigration. He just wants it to continue. And this is camouflage, a sticking plaster. It's a cosmetic gesture to try and get people to accept mass immigration. And he was at it again in 2019, more recently, basically saying something very similar. Again, the difference now is that people really are talking about mass immigration. They feel more free because so many people are saying it. They can't clamp down on all of them. Up to about 2006, if you spoke out against mass immigration, you could find yourself on trial, and people certainly did. But because there are so many people speaking out about it now, they can't prosecute everyone. So he's now trying to get ahead of that story so that he can. What he's saying is, if it comes to fisticuffs, don't blame me because I made this speech. Okay, so, and this is in 2019. Migrants should be forced to integrate more to combat the far right. So the risk is the far right, and migrants need to integrate more in order to stop, I guess, people like me is what he's saying. Migrant communities must be compelled to do more to integrate to help combat the rise of far-right bigotry. So what is he going to compel them to do? Well, let's see. I mean, what really radical actions is he going to propose? Blair makes the pointed intervention in a report by his Institute for Global Change, following the example of the Clintons there, which backs forcing schools to have an intake that reflects local diversity. Wow, that is a radical measure. Yeah, local diversity in the inner city of Birmingham or East London. Creating a compulsory citizenship program for teenagers. Now, I have seen one of those a long time ago. What those compulsory citizenship programs are. I remember one of the questions was, what is the slang term for somebody from Liverpool? Okay, so that is really going to get people to integrate, to know that. People just bone up on all the gen that they need to, and well, it's irrelevant. He knows it's irrelevant. He's not saying it because he thinks it will have any effect. He's saying it so that he can say he made a speech about it, so he can say he got out in front of it. All right. And toughening enforcement against the perpetrators of hate speech. Well, I wonder who they are, given that this is intended. He wants to combat the far right. I wonder who he's going to enforce, which hate speech he's going to enforce against. It also calls for compulsory citizenship education. Yes, you've already told us that. A ban on segregated shift patterns. I think that is where Muslims might say we're not working with non-Muslims here. And well, there's already a ban on that. And the creation of a new cabinet post created to oversee integration. Pity the country that needs an integration minister. We already have three of them: the Home Secretary, the Immigration Minister, and the Secretary of State for Communities and Levelling Up, I believe his title is. So there are three of those, and it's still not working. This is him. Oh God, I'll take the picture away. This is Tony Blair, basically trying to Well, I'll show you what he's doing here, because he actually talked about it. This is from a Daily Mail article. I'll just show you the title here. It's called how Labour let in 3 million immigrants in defiance of the overwhelming wishes of the British people. And then if I go back down again, hold on, bear with me. Okay, here we are. In his book, he makes, I haven't read his book, but I'm told there's only one page of it. I think it's 500 or 600 pages. And one page talks about immigration. And what he says in his book is that at the 2005 election, that was his last election, their strategy was described as being, because our position was sophisticated enough, a sort of confess and avoid, as the lawyers say, we won out. That's him cackling all the way to the bank. And that's what he is doing with those articles. Confess and avoid. Get out ahead of it. Say, oh yes, we recognise you might not like this, you might have strong feelings, and I'm going to say, yes, you're reasonable. I'm going to sop up some of your bad feelings, but nothing is going to happen. Then I'm going to avoid it. That's what he's doing there. And that's what I think they're all doing. What they are not doing is coming up with a reason to justify mass immigration, because they don't want to. Again, if someone does something bad to you for years, decades on end, and they just will not tell you why, then there's a nasty reason for it that they don't want to tell you. And that's from the Migration Policy Institute. That's just a table of migration policy and legislative milestones under Blair. You see all those, I would say that's, I don't know, 15 or 20 during his rule, things like controlling our borders, making migration work for Britain, a 5-year departmental plan, that kind of thing, or the Asylum and Immigration Treatment of Claimants Act. That is more wind in the ears. Whilst all of that is happening, what you are getting is that curve just carrying on relentlessly. This is all part of the theatre. All right. So, and that continued. I want to show you that this is just it's a paper from Migration Watch. I'm not quoting them because they agree with me on some things. It's because there's a nice summary of Ed Miliband, of the one before him, the Gordon Brown, of what happened in the run-up to the 2010 election. Basically, what you had was their advisors saying, we've got to talk about immigration. We're going to lose this election. If we don't, we have to talk about it. And what he's saying is, Matt Kavanagh, former special advisor at Number 10, wrote an important article for Prospect magazine. He explained that it was only in early 2009 that immigration itself became the subject of serious cabinet debate. It was agreed that they would talk more about immigration, admit some mistakes, recognise that not all immigration was good, and set out for the first time a clear position on numbers. They would reject the idea of a cap, but accept that numbers matter and reassure people that they would come down. However, the cabinet and the official machine remained in denial. He concluded that it became increasingly clear that for this election cycle, at least Labour had lost the argument. So they remained in denial. They're not going to look at it. So if you go back 10 years, just a decade, to that Evening Standard article and that graph, the Evening Standard article, Andrew Nether saying they were going to do it in 2000, we're going to do this, we don't want the public finding out about it, we're just going to gouge them in the eye, stick them in the eye with it. And that thing about past what implications in flying in the face of what the civil servants have said they need in order to check the numbers of illegal immigrants. And if you compare the two, what you see, you can only explain that difference. On the one, you have a very ruthless and aggressive approach, and then by 2010, they just can't get it together even to talk about it. That suggests to me a kind of what I would say is a kind of gentlemanly cross-party agreement, a class agreement among the political, you could say the ruling class. This serves us. We're not going to go against this. It's nice. It's in our favour. Now, again, I don't think this is a cold, thought-through conspiracy. I don't think they do think, really. I think it's just felt. It's a reflex sense. It's in the same way they find it attractive, in the same way that out of kind of group interest, class interest, I would call it. So in the same way that a factory owner would find a bunch of striking workers as beyond the pale ugly, and those striking workers would find that factory owner, or factory owners in general, as being beyond the pale ugly. So it just it is unacceptable for in their view to talk about this. And one of the things that's happened since then is there's more. They've had to lay on more theatre. They realise they can't be silent about it, so there's more theatre coming forward, but still no explanation given as to the reason for mass migration. Now part of that theatre is the talks by Blair and other people, and also the Tory party saying that it would really, since 2005, it's been saying it would get a grip on migration. I think the three elections before Boris Johnson's election, I think was it 2015, 2017, and 2010. The Tory party said they were going to get net immigration down from hundreds of thousands to tens of thousands, and all that happened was the curve kept going up. They didn't mean a word of it. That's more theatre. And Boris Johnson said we would get control of our borders. He didn't mean a word of it either. That curve just went vertical. So so government policy, manifesto promises, legislation, policy papers, that's all wind in the ears. That's talk. That's pantomime. And so is this. Now this is a story about the barge in Suella Braverman. That barge in Dorset, here's an article, I think there are other articles dealing with the cost, but this one deals with it most succinctly from 2 months ago. Staggering cost of the migrant barges revealed as new figures show they are already full. Well, they're actually empty. Okay. A staggering 1.6 billion contract has been handed to controversial Australian travel firm, so that's money out of the country, to establish the ships bringing up accommodation and travel services, it has been reported. And and it is, quotes, a 2-year agreement with the government. Now, if I go down a bit there, the Bibby Stockholm, that's the one which is empty at the moment. It's been having some Legionella checks, and also migrants are suing because they say they're afraid of water, they don't want to go on a barge. So the Bibby Stockholm are set to be moored in Dorset, can accommodate 500 migrants, and the additional 2 announced last week will likely take on the same number. So that's likely to be 1,500. So 1,500 people for 2 years, that's 1.6 billion. If you do the maths, that's £533,000 per year per one. So to house one migrant for 2 years, or 2 migrant years, cost £1 2/3 million. Okay, that is how much money they're prepared to spend, not to solve the problem. It isn't solving the problem. It's to create pantomime, which diverts us from hold on, let me just find it. Diverts our attention from that graph. That is the purpose of that barge. So whilst we're looking at that barge, we're not looking at that graph of legal immigration. So that's how much money they're prepared to spend in order to keep that pantomime going. Okay. Now, I appreciate that I'm being kind of tough here. And I've sort of tried to think, could there be some innocent but dumb explanation? And I mean, is it like nuts idealism? I mean, as soon as you become a politician, you become this nuts idealist. Well, I think the expenses scandal dealt a blow to that idea. I don't think that's the case. Perhaps if I start by looking at this story, this is Care for Calais. Trade unions call for safe passage. 26 unions call for safe passage. You see, and those are huge unions. I can't think of any other unions. I mean, Unison, PCS, NUJ, Unite, the Education Union, ASLEF. I mean, huge. All the main unions calling for joining with Care for Calais to an organisation like Care for Calais to call for safe passage. Now, safe passage, This article doesn't define what's meant by safe passage. I assume what it means at the moment, if Care for Calais are calling for it, is that Britain ferries people from France. So sets up an office in France saying, if you want to come to Britain to claim asylum, don't climb on a lorry, don't get in a rubber dinghy. We're so concerned about your safety. We will put you on a nice comfy airplane, take you to Britain. You can live in Britain. You'll be in a hotel whilst we do all the paperwork. So we will bring you here. And there's no logical stopping point to that. If you do that for France, I guess you're going to have to do that for Germany, maybe for Austria, maybe down in the Balkans. I guess the logic would be to do one right at the other side of the EU, where people enter the Schengen area, EU countries. Maybe the logic would say you put an office like that in, say, Serbia, so that anyone who can get to Serbia, you then fly them over to Britain and then process their application. Just think how the effect that will have on numbers coming here. Now, what I wonder, again, I'm not trying to have a go at these unions here. Well, I certainly hope people in the comments will call me a nasty, evil man and say, look, you're horrible. I hate you. You are against the welfare state. You don't love the NHS. You don't like trade unions. You're horrible. That means you're wrong. Okay. I don't care. You don't have a choice about this. It's going to break down anyway. So you can hate me all you like. The people who will fare the worst are the people who are not prepared to accept that it might happen. But my point here is not to try to slag off these individual unions. It's not to give them a hard time. It's to try to work out if there is some kind of non-malevolent explanation. Now, I think the conversation between a reasonable onlooker and one of these unions would be, well, if you have that safe passage, that will hugely increase the number of people coming here. They don't have to deal with people smugglers. They don't have to spend any money. They don't have to do an uncomfy passage across the channel. They don't have to live in Calais for 6 months, being really miserable and cold, dealing with organisations like Care for Calais. Why? That will harm your employees. And I guess that the trade unionists, they all seem to be speaking with one voice. The trade unionists, I guess, would say, well, my values compel me to speak up for the powerless migrants around the world. That's all I care about. They've suffered terribly. I cannot do other than speak up for them and to say that they need a nice comfy flight over to Britain. Okay, I guess that's what he would say. I'm caricaturing his response there. And then I think the reasonable onlooker might say, well, if those numbers come in, that is going to increase the labour pool. That is going to reduce the wages of your members. And that's going to mean that's against the interests of your members. And I would guess then that the trade unionists would say, that's why we need to fight even harder as trade unions to make sure that evil business owners and landlords don't take advantage of that, which is incidentally what that was what Ed Miliband's main concern was in, I think, was it the 2015 election, when in their manifesto they were going to deal with the problems of immigration by making sure that employers and landlords didn't put people in bad conditions. Okay, mainly migrants. So I think that's what the trade unionist would say. So we need to work all the harder to protect people. And then the reasonable onlooker would say, well, that only counts if people are members of your union, because you can't protect them if they're not members of your union. And I'm guessing that trade union leader would say, yes, and people will then have more reason to join our union because their pay will go down, their conditions will go down, demand for their labour, their value will reduce, and that will mean we get more union members and we have more to do, I guess. That would seem to me to be the logical line of reasoning. Now, is that an innocent line of reasoning? It seems to me to be more in line with the idea of grinding people down a bit. But again, I don't know the individual motivations of these trade unions. All I know is that they're supporting Care for Calais and their call for safe passage to the UK. So they could have a much more innocent explanation than the one I've tried to trace out there. What it But there's a similar explanation that I can, if I do that, a similar explanation I can come up with for politicians. No, a slightly worse explanation, which is they're doing it through a really stupid, misguided a sense of the corporate big state, welfare state economy, this big all managing government state, all powerful, all managing corporate state, and in the corporate state you have government. It doesn't mix with all businesses, so it doesn't mix with Rita's Cafe, Ted's Tires and Bill's Plumbing. It mixes with big businesses that have finance departments and a policy department, so a policy officer they can meet with in Downing Street. So, and that's how corporatism works. Government hand in hand with big business, and big business wants cheaper labour, because big business is not hiring out labour like most employees do or a lot of consultants do. It is using labour to make products to sell, so it wants cheaper labour. So it will always push for that, and it will disguise it in terms like the skills gap. There's a skills gap we need to plug. No, that doesn't mean that. It means wages are too high, we want to depress them even further. So and this, I think, and I wondered if that might be sort of a misguided, possibly politicians have a sort of a misguided economic outlook like that. What I don't get is that they could actually talk about it more if that was the way they thought about it. But I thought I'd perhaps give them the benefit of the doubt and look at it, because what occurred to me is that mass immigration has been occurring very much in tandem with loose monetary policy, where central banks print money and then make it available to banks to lend to businesses and to people in society. So there's a lot of money swilling around, free to borrow at low interest rates. That's what they've been doing, well, really for at least 20 years, and since the 2001 recession, and very much since 2008. And if you look at those two graphs, that is the graph. That's from Bloomberg. That is a graph of the Bank of England's assets on it, how much money it has printed, how much money it has put into the economy. And you can see it going, that's just from 2009. It was much lower around year 2000, but it's continued going up and up and up. Suddenly when 2008 it goes up, and it just keeps going up with round after round of QE. The pandemic hits and it goes up and up, and then inflation arises because the pandemic was mismanaged financially, as it was in every other way, and the result of that is the interest rates have had to go up, and so they can't stuff the economy with any more money because people won't borrow at those higher interest rates. So the level of money in the economy has started to tail off. Now I want to, you see that curve there, the mass immigration curve? They're similar curves. I think it's possible. What came to my mind is that it's possible governments, by using zombie monetary policy, so a lot of cheap money that keeps dead and dying businesses alive and enabling them to paper over the cracks with a lot of cheap borrowing, a lot of cheap money, so they can just keep alive, not as a more efficient business, not as a more profitable business, but just as a business with more debt. Maybe that goes hand in hand with mass immigration. So you don't get a better mess, you get a cheaper mess, a mess that can buy more labour cheaper. So rubbish, dying businesses, more zombie businesses. And what confirms me in that suspicion is where you see that cheap money tailing off after the pandemic as interest rates rose up, because the UK pumped in an awful lot of money. The UK was about the only Western state that broke the cardinal rule that you don't just print money and spend it. You print money and you lend it. You lend it to government, you lend it to businesses. The UK government, you can't find this on the internet. It seems to be a memory hold. Half a $1 trillion was printed up and just given or advanced direct to the government as quotes a temporary measure. And that's why our inflation is higher than other countries. Because you just don't you don't print money and just spray it out there, which is what the UK government did. But as that inflation rose, pumping that money into the economy, that tailed off. But what you see simultaneously, the amount of mass immigration went vertical. I think that is to compensate for that. So you have a similar curve, that one falls off, that one compensates. I think that that line is going to continue vertical. According to Rishi Sunak in his £400 a migrant plan, it's going to continue. He's talking about 2.5 million a year. Well, I think he means it. Okay, so how's that working out? Well, is it possible that politicians thought, that's good for the economy? They keep saying that making the pie bigger makes it sweeter. Someone coming in makes you more productive. This is just nonsense. I mean, this is in 2003. David Blunkett, the Home Secretary, he said there is no limit to the amount of immigration that Britain can take. They said there's no limit to the population that the UK can house. Well, I wonder if he's saying that now. And what he said is, without legal migration, growth would stall, economic flexibility and productivity would reduce, Mr. Blunkett told Newsnight. Well, let's see how that worked out. He said that in November 2003. So the end of 2003, he said that. Now that, if you can see that, let me just try and zoom in a tiny bit. That is a productivity graph that comes from the ONS. I think they're fudging it a bit, but even this graph looks really bad. If you see from 1994 through to 2007, so I would say about 3.5 years after Blunkett gave his talk there, and after about a decade of Labour's mass immigration, after the open door policy began, look what happened to productivity. Suddenly it just tails off, it flatlines. That ends in 2018. It has continued for another 5 years until today. Productivity, i.e. output per hour, that has just flatlined whilst that mass immigration has been going on, and it's still flatlining. And it seems to me it's perfectly obvious why that would be the case, because you're just inviting a lot of people who are certainly probably are not literate in our language, certainly don't come from a highly educated culture, might struggle to be educated in this country. A lot of them fit for the unskilled labour market. That reduces pay, it reduces wages. It means that businesses, they don't have to increase productivity, they don't have to train people, they don't have to retain people, they don't have to look after employees because there's always someone to replace them. They focus on the low end of the market, dredging the bottom of the market, and which is why the UK has gone from what it was about 30 years ago, quite a high wage, high skilled economy, now to a low wage, low skilled economy, almost a screwdriver economy. And that is the answer to David Blunkett's idea that it would increase productivity. It's had precisely the opposite effect. I think, now this again, it could be, you could say, well, this is just misguided economics. They thought allowing more people in to fill jobs would keep the economy humming. I think it was obvious that it wasn't going to have that effect. I think this fits much better with my thesis, my view, that this is about grinding you down. It's about making you poorer. It's also about denying you identity, about just making you interchangeable with anyone from anywhere in the world. But here it's about if you reduce productivity per person, if I put it simply, if people don't make any more stuff, you don't get to enjoy an increased amount of stuff. So if productivity, it's a technical term, it's a nerdy term, but if output per person flatlines, if what you make, what each person makes flatlines, what you can enjoy, what you can get flatlines, whilst other things like housing costs, capital costs, maybe a university costs, other things, or private medical costs, if you do that, those will go up and up and up. But particularly your mortgage payments and rent, that will go up and up. But your pay, your wealth, that won't increase at all. I think that fits with, all of this fits with my thesis that the purpose of mass immigration is to grind you. And what all of this tells me is that you see that mass immigration curve? That is going to continue. It might go sideways for a couple of years, might even go down, maybe a little temporarily, but the overall effect is it is going to keep going up sharply. That if you can paint a kind of exponential curve going up like that, it is going towards the ceiling. That's going to continue, and all of this talk about it, all of the politicians coming out trying to justify it, trying to distract you from it, that's going to continue as well. It won't do anything to change the situation. That is, we are not going to vote our way out of it. It is working. It is working. It is making us more dependent. It is putting us more to sleep. It is making us more frightened. It is making us less likely to turn on government because we feel beholden to them. We are beholden to them, standing in line where the man with the upper class accent tells us to. We will not vote our way out of that. We will collapse our way out of that. And I would say that the choice for us is, are we prepared to put up with that just to keep the welfare drip feed in our arms, sedating us? But that isn't a choice. We have no choice about that because this situation will collapse. If the mass immigration doesn't collapse the system, the finances and economics will. I think we will collapse because the debt bubble burst. I think that's what will break this down. That is what will put a stop to that curve. And I think that is actually what will eventually make it go negative, as I've outlined in previous videos. But my overall point here is, do not think that the politicians are in any way acting in your interests. If they were, they would be able to explain it to you. They can't, they don't even try. They're doing bad things to you because they have bad motives. And I think you can infer that from their failure to come up with any good reason for doing it. Thank you.